Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back in to bring the 7.2 disc guide, and I apologize for it being late. And this is going to be a quick, easy-to-consume format for everything you need to know about disc. If you're looking for the longer explanations, the longer versions of everything, it's going to be in my written guides, linked below on Wowhead. All right, getting into it, Disc Priest is the quintessential burst healer. It is quickly reversing rapid AoE damage on the raid by preparing atonements on everybody, or as many people as you possibly can, before this damage actually goes out. So atonement, of course, is much different than it used to be in the past. Atonement is basically your small and temporary beacons of light that you are putting out on different raid members, so that whenever you're dealing damage, you are directing the resulting healing into those specific targets. All right. Most of Disc's strength is going to be through raid healing. It can do some spot healing, but it is not nearly as strong as many other classes. So primarily, your focus in a raid environment is going to be on lots and lots of raid healing. So, kicking it off with talents. Of course, one of the default setups really that you're going to be getting here is going to be taking Castigation. The other options, Schism, consumes quite a large amount of mana. Castigation is quite simple, just get another bolt out of Atonement, or sorry, out of Penance, I should say, which is very, very strong. The Penitent, for at least PvE environment, you're not really going to be taking this. You do not want to be really casting friendly atonements. You're doing considerably less healing, and of course you're taking less damage, or you're dealing less damage, which is a big thing. 30 tier, more often than not you're going to be taking Feather. There might be some situations where you're going to be wanting Body and Soul. I know for the disc challenge I was using Masochism just to have a little bit of extra damage reduction, but in a raid environment and generally in most kind of Dungeon Mythic Plus environments, you're going to be taking Feather. The 45s are fairly irrelevant in a raid environment because there's not really a need for any of the talents to be taken. For most fights, if you're in, say, Mythic Plus, you need to be taking Shining Force to kind of get yourself some space, or to be knocking a specific ad into a pile of groups. But generally speaking, the 45 tier is kind of whatever you'd like. If you'd like a knockback, if you'd like a shorter cooldown on your fear, or if you'd like to have a nice little pet whenever you're using your mind control, can be helpful as well. 60s is all about your mana savings or your mana regen. So you have Mindbender, which is going to be dealing lots and lots of damage, and it can synchronize very well with having additional haste. But unfortunately, at the moment, it is not the preferred mana regen talent for raiding right now, although it is preferred if you're in Mythic Plus because it will be adding a lot of damage. Shield Discipline is the way to go in terms of raiding. It will be regenerating you the maximum amount of mana and for the maximum amount of benefit. Solace gives you some good regen, and is actually, the cooldown is actually lowered by haste, but again, it's a lot more maintenance, it's a lot more extra buttons that you have to be pushing. While you can be getting a lot of casts off as you're getting more and more haste, it is also taking a lot more time to be able to get all of the casts out, and it can be further reducing your time to be spreading atonements because you are spending time regenerating mana. So, of course, the preferred methods go after Shield Discipline for raids, without a doubt. Mindbender for 5-mans. In terms of 5-mans, you can take either Twist of Fate. I prefer taking it for higher Mythic Plus, where you're having people dropping a lot lower, a lot quicker, so that you're able to have this passive benefit to help top people off very rapidly. But you can also take Power Infusion for 5-mans. It's really up to you on this one. I definitely would recommend taking Contrition for raids. Again, while most of your healing is going to be coming in a burst instant, maybe 2-3 second window where you're going to be doing the most healing in a ramp up of atonements for the whole raid, it is more important to get a larger amount of atonements out and not have to worry about sustaining them longer and longer and spending more mana to sustain your atonements even longer. So Contrition is definitely the pick to go for in terms of raiding, especially Mythic raiding. You want to be able to have as many atonements out as possible. The extra atonement duration is very, very powerful. For your 90s, Halo is always going to be the way to go for raiding, and Divine Star can be used in Mythic Plus, depending on how brave you are with using Halo and making sure that you're not pulling any extra trash mobs. Divine Star does some okay instant damage if it's a lot of little packs of ads, but generally the 90 tier is not too relevant in Mythic Plus. Clarity Will, if you really, really, really need extra healing on the tank in a Mythic Plus, generally speaking, I would not recommend it, but there are some situations where it can be alright, just putting up bigger and bigger bubbles on people, but for the most part, I'd be sticking with Halo usually. So, for your hundreds, Purge the Wicked is dealing tons and tons of extra damage, replaces Shadow of Pain and is an instant dot, and it takes for quite a while. You can spread it further with your Penance, very, very strong. Absolutely must take for raids. If you are feeling confident in a Mythic Plus and you are not needing the ability for Grace or the extra healing out of Grace, then having the extra damage will actually push the Mythic Plus to go a lot faster, increase your own damage, and can help you really accelerate through it. But if you're just starting out, Grace is definitely going to be the way to go. It's a very, very safe talent and helps you really quickly reverse damage. One of the struggles if you are playing Disc in a 5-man is that you don't have any big instant chunky cast heals like a Holy Priest would have with their Holy Words to instantly reverse the damage. So having Atonement already on the target, you're seeing they're dropping low, you're able to get a Shadow Mend off, you're able to do a ton extra healing and top them off very rapidly thanks to Grace. So Grace for 5-mans, again, if you're pushing higher levels of 5-mans or if you're not super secure with going through it. If you're pretty secure with it, again, purge the wicked extra damage, can't go wrong there. Shadow Covenant is just absolutely never take. This is just such a bad talent. They keep changing it, and it never is that worthwhile to take. So don't take Shadow Covenant, not worth bothering with it. Now moving on to stats, everything you want to be checking out for stats and how you're adjusting your gear. Definitely going after haste as your primary stat will be the way to go. So going after haste, then going after crit, then mastery, then of course versatility for raids will be the optimal path for you. Mastery gets quite a bit worse in raids. Of course, your mastery is just increasing the amount of atonement that is going to be going to your targets, the amount of healing that's going to be going to your targets with atonement. While that can be resulting in a lot of extra healing in raids, it's very, very close in value to crit for raiding, but at the same time, you're not getting the extra damage out of it. So that's why you're going to be going for haste, then after crit, then mastery. Of course, like I said, if you're doing primarily Mythic Plus, then edging away from mastery, because again, it's not going to give you a lot of extra damage, and you're having a greater mix of single target healing with like Shadow Mend and atonement healing, which will be, of course, be affected by your mastery. But of course, as you're using more and more Shadow Mend, for example, for Mythic Plus, you're getting less of value out of your mastery. Of course, with gems, enchants, and the like, going for Claw, for the marker Claw for your neck piece, going after Intellect, of course, for your back piece, and rings and gems going into haste as much as possible. If you're able to get Leech on your gear, Leech is extremely, extremely valuable as a Disc Priest. Having just a small amount of Leech can be really, really powerful. So if you have any Leech in your gear, it's pretty close in item level to the other slot. Definitely try to get some Leech on your gear if at all possible. It's very, very strong. Same goes for food. If you're able to only have individual food, of course, the preferred haste food is going to be the Ashari Salad. Moving on to your artifact weapon, it should be pretty easy to be filling out all the first 35 ranks for your artifact weapon. From here, it's just going to be a simple matter of where you will be going after you hit that 36th trait. So of course you will be able to add one extra trait to every 3 of 3 in the original set, and then furthermore you will be able to go through a new path to get your new Gul'dan trait. So the ideal path that's going to be on your screen right now is going to be going for Confession first to be able to get the extra atonement. Of course, you're going to be getting the 36 traits, so you will likely be getting both of those very, very rapidly. Then you are going to be going after the newest traits that are going to be coming out, because again, the extra damage reduction that you're getting out of the new trait, which is Lenience's Reward, is actually extremely, extremely valuable. Extra damage reduction, even though it may not show up on the meters or anything like that, it's extremely valuable for your raid, and will reduce tons and tons of damage along the way. And then, of course, you'll be seeing the rest of the route as you're going for your gold trait, and then the other fill-ins that you want to be going for after that. Primarily with Disc, the focus is going to be on maximizing your damage as often as you possibly can. So that's why there is the focus to go to Confession, get extra penance damage immediately, fill out the new traits, and then you're going to be working on the next damage abilities to augment, and then you'll be filling out the rest of the tier as follows. There's a little bit of discrepancy between some of the later traits, but again, as you're getting more and more artifact knowledge, you should be able to farm these up no problem. Now for covering raiding versus Mythic Plus and 5-man healing, it's kind of two different sides of Disc. So for example, for raiding, you're never really wanting to use a lot of Shadow Men, a lot of Plea or anything like that. You're usually just mass spreading AoE healing. But in 5-mans, many times you're going to be using primarily Shadow Men. If things really, really get bad, you're going to be using lots and lots of Shadow Men. So it's two different sides of Disc and two different sides that you kind of have to focus on. So I want to make sure I touch on both of them. So for raiding, of course, like I'm saying, you're going to be using lots and lots of AoE healing. If you're able to get into a situation where, in terms of your raid composition, you are spending the majority of your time focusing on the AoE healing, getting some tank healing out, but of course that responsibility can fall to some of the other healers who are a little bit stronger at it. Especially with the spot healing, the instant damage that can go out on individual players. Disc is not as strong as other healers at that, but they are immensely, immensely strong in just all the AoE raid damage that can kind of go out. So being able to kind of talk to your other healers to kind of set up that perfect situation, if at all possible, will really help you out, really help your performance out, as well as making life a little bit less stressful, I think, in general for your raid, because they know they'll have a little bit better priorities. Going into just how you're going to be handling fights, of course, a fight like Croesus is just definitely a bread and butter example of how you can optimally heal as a Disc Priest, and it's just such a good fight for them. And you'll see so many times where you can really judge how high you should be ramping up in atonements or ramping down, because most of your healing is not going to come from constant, maintained atonements. It'll come from single moments in time, big windows in time that you want to ramp up to get to that point, bust out a lot of damage, heal everybody up, and then you let your atonements kind of fall off as well. You know, mana is definitely a factor for this. For your main atonement spreaders, it's either going to be Rapture with power and shield spam, or you'll be using lots of Holy Word Radiance. Again, it's not that important to be using Plea. In fact, it's extremely costly if you have a lot of atonements out, so definitely keep that in mind. Using it here or there at low atonements is okay, but generally you don't want to be using Plea that much in a raid environment. Now, to actually activate your atonement, or actually get the value out of your atonement, two main abilities that you're going to be using is going to be either Light's Wrath, or it's going to be Penance, or sometimes it'll be both. It'll be back-to-back. Ideally, you're going to be using Light's Wrath for your heaviest ramp-ups, and again, it has a pretty short cooldown, so you can be using it fairly frequently, and you will usually just be backing it up with a Penance right afterwards. Keeping Powered Shield on cooldown, Penance on cooldown. Again, you can save Penance's you can save using Penance for a second or two here and there if you're going to be getting it for the sweet, perfect window, but generally speaking, you're going to be using it on cooldown, and of course, keeping Purge the Wicked or Shadow Word Pain on as many targets as possible, as reasonable, until you have to ramp up into a lot of atonements. Then, of course, keeping that on as many targets as possible will be very, very beneficial for your overall healing and kind of resolve any lingering damage still on people. Don't worry too much about downtime. A lot of times for Disc and Raid, people will just be spamming Smite over and over and over again. They'll kind of lose sight of their timers and when everything is going to be happening next. It's much, much more important for you to be keeping an eye on your timers, emphasizing your timers so you know when the damage is going to be happening and know that you'll be able to prepare for that damage. It's extremely, extremely important to be able to focus on that kind of damage and what you need to do in order to prepare for it, rather than just kind of spamming Smite into your blue in the face. Sometimes many Disc Priests will just kind of stop casting, save their mana, let it regen, because there's absolutely nothing happening. Just spamming Smite with no damage happening is not really going to give you much of a benefit at all. So keep that in mind of how much you are using your mana and how you're just prepping for the next big damage coming out. Because Disc Priest, it's all about the next big hit that's going to come and how you're preparing for it. For Mythic Plus, it's a little bit of a different standard because you are the only healer in there, and you can't lean on any other healers to be helping you with the spot healing or the tank healing or things like that. So that's one of the biggest reasons why Grace comes into play and why Grace is so useful in Mythic Plus. So you will be spending a lot of time making sure that you're using Shadow Mend on the tanks as often as you possibly can. And generally the way I like to do it, and the preferred way to be going through your Mythic Plus, is to be using as much atonement healing as you possibly can until lots of damage is going out on the group, and that is forcing you to switch gears and go into more Shadow Mend. So many times, especially with high Mythic Plus, you will have people rapidly drop very, very low. So having the mass atonement on everybody, or having lots of atonements out before say any ads are jumping on your melee's faces or your range faces or even your face, already having atonement out on them can be very, very helpful. While it is very mana costly, keep in mind in Mythic Plus you can just stop and drink whenever you leave combat, so make sure you have as much mage cakes or just any of the water that you can buy from a vendor ready to go whenever you need it, so you can instantly just drop, get some extra mana, and be prepared for the next trash pack. You can deal considerable amounts of damage in both raids and in Mythic Plus, but you must do so in a way that is also maximizing your healing. If you always have the plus mark by your name, you are a healer, no matter what the hybrid thing is talking about. So you will be brought for a healer to do as much healing as possible. If you can maximize your damage in the meantime, that's fantastic, go for it. But keep in mind your priority, not letting DPS die so you can get a little bit extra damage off, not letting anybody else die in your party so the Mythic Plus group will not lose any extra time, will not lose any extra damage. Things like that are very important. Finding the right balance in between your damage dealing and in between your healing is very, very vital, and will make your life a lot easier and make you a lot more successful as a Disc Priest. Keep in mind any extra mana mechanics that you can get, like Wisdoms and Innervates, make a tremendous difference in terms of allowing you to be using much, much more of your Powered Radiance, to be getting mass atonements out, and having even bigger burst windows that you'll be using your Light's Wrath for, and making you a lot more successful. Hope this guide was helpful for you. Hopefully it was a good, quick rundown of everything that you need to know. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the description below. You can always join us on Discord. And of course, keep in mind the written guide with all the much, much more lengthy explanations is going to be linked in the description as well. And you can always find me on wowhead.com. All right. Hope you all enjoyed it. Have a good one. I'll see you all next time.